All right, Nick, let's talk about the Detroit Lions. Combine week has passed us, but still, there's a lot of information coming out from the interviews, from the sessions that happened during the combine. There's always a lot of interesting things happening this time of year. And one thing in particular, one person the Lions have met with really sparks some interest. I think it is a really interesting move by them. It speaks volumes about what they're going to do in the future here. But before we get into that, I'm Andrew, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, Nick, as I alluded to, one really interesting interview for the Detroit Lions could be signaling a big move for them come draft day. Let's get into the article and we could talk more about it on the other side. This, of course, from over on Athlon Sports. It says the Detroit Lions could find themselves in the market for a quarterback in this year's NFL draft. While speaking at the Combine, Alabama's quarterback Jalen Milroe revealed that he had met with the Lions. This is via A to Z Sports. Mike Payton says Milroe has a connection with current Lions roster as he started the Let All Naysayers Know brand with Aaron Arnold, who the Lions selected in the first round of last year's draft. We know Lions love Alabama players in general. I think it's a really interesting update. I know there's a lot to unpack here, Nick. Curious what your thoughts are, but Lions fans, in the comment section below, let's not say that anyone is replacing anybody, just the general prospect here of Jalen Milroe. What do you think about him as a QB prospect for the Lions going forward? Do you love him? Do you hate him? Is he too polarizing? Too much unknown? Let us know your thoughts on everything Jalen Milroe here in the comment section below. But nonetheless, Nick, what do you think about this latest news for Detroit?
I think it's very interesting, right? Obviously, the Detroit Lions, they interviewed and had a lot of formal sit downs with a lot of different players at the combine, as every team does. They primarily focused on edge defenders and really front seven guys, which obviously makes sense when you look at their overall team structure. And of course, the injuries and now the depth issues are going to try and resolve. But the fact that they also met with Jalen Milroe, I think, is indicative of a larger thing we've seen with the Detroit Lions going back a couple years ago when they selected Hendon Hooker out of the NFL draft, is they are taking an approach that was very similar to what we say. We say this all the time that the Chiefs did when they had Alex Smith and they drafted Patrick Mahomes, when the Packers did when they had Aaron Rodgers and they selected Jordan Love, or before that when the Packers had Brett Favre and selected Aaron Rodgers, in that you always want to be looking to get better, younger, and cheaper at the quarterback position, right? Now, every once in a while, you're going to get your guy. You're going to get the all-time great. You're going to get your Brady, your Mahomes, right? Your Drew Brees, right? One of those guys, your Joe Burrow, and you just roll with that because you just won the lottery. You found your guy, and you're going to have a very happy 15, 20 years. But if you don't have that kind of elite guy, and they're very rare, right? First ballot Hall of Famers, a franchise usually gets one every 15, 20 years if you're lucky, right? Sometimes it takes a lot longer than that. Lions fans, of course, I know you can go back to maybe Bobby Lane in the 50s. I don't know if there's been a quarterback that's even at that level for a very long time in Detroit. And if you don't have that guy, and nothing against Jared Goff, he's a very good, he's a B plus guy. But the reality is, we've seen in back to back playoff runs where the team is ready to make a run for a title, and Goff just isn't in those big moments, right? He had a poor second half against the 49ers a couple years ago in the conference championship game. People blamed Campbell for some of the decision making on fourth down, me included. But the reality is, if Goff executes better, they win. Of course, he had a disastrous performance against Washington with a just litany of turnovers that probably cost the Lions a victory there. So now we have back-to-back playoff berths. We have Sean McVay, one of the smartest coaches in football. He wanted to move off of Jared Goff after having him for a number of years. Again, Jared Goff is very good, but the reality is he's not Mahomes, right? He is not Joe Burrow. He is not Lamar Jackson. He is not Tom Brady. He's not Drew Brees. So what does that mean? It means you're looking to get younger and cheaper at the quarterback position if you can find a good enough guy. So you want to pivot from that model to the Philadelphia Eagles model. They had Carson Wentz. They went after Jalen Hurts and drafted him. Couple years later, he becomes a starter. He's very cheap. Is he an elite level quarterback? No, but because he's cheaper, they can build an incredible roster and maintain an incredible roster around him. And I think that's a dilemma for the Detroit Lions going forward, because starting in 2026, not this year, but 2026, here are the next three cap hits: Jared Goff, 70 million, 55 million, 62 million, right? That's a lot of dollars for a quarterback that's BB plus. That's not championship level stuff, right? You want to look at what the Philadelphia Eagles are doing. You want to look at what they're playing Jalen Hurts. Remember, Jalen Hurts isn't cheap, right? It's not like they're giving him nothing whatsoever. I'm going to pull up his numbers here real quick just to make sure I quote it correctly. But the reality is, you have got to be mindful of this. This is Jalen Hurts' next numbers: 31 million, 42 million, 48 million starting in 2026. 20 to 30 million dollars cheaper. He's a good quarterback. Is Jalen Hurts the best in football? No, but he's younger and cheaper. I think the Lions are trying to go down this route. They're going to take a few bites at the apple. Hendon Hooker, maybe Jalen Milroe. It's a smart strategy for the Lions to take.
Yeah, Nick, and I agree with you because we talk about Jared Goff, and I'm gonna bring up one point you already brought up, but I got the numbers on it as well. Talk about what Jared Goff has done down the stretch, and I want to get into that in just a second. But you talked about where he failed last year in the playoffs. His worst game of the entire season was against the Washington Commanders, a 45 PFF grade for him, passing grade 44.3, just abysmal, fumble 29 grade for him as well. And
Oh,
then
and not to cut you off, but against a defense that gave up 55 the next week against Philadelphia. So not a championship defense in Washington either.
yeah, no, it's just not a great game. And, people have bad games, and that's okay, but not in the playoffs. You got to have it in the playoffs. That's when it matters most. It's okay pretty much any other time, but in the playoffs, that's when you don't want to be so bad. And unfortunately, he was. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Jared Goff was bad in that playoff game. And I think that's the larger point here. And we've talked about this a couple times. We've been wrong a little bit, maybe too harsh on Goff, but we said he is the choke point of this offense. And this isn't this coming year's offense. This was Ben Johnson's offense. We don't even know how he's going to be in a new offensive scheme. There's a lot to come here. There's a lot to think about. So Jared Goff was the choke point of Ben Johnson's offense. It was only going to be as good as Jared Goff could play. And so I think we're not saying you need to get rid of Jared Goff right now. You got to move on from him. We're saying it's smart to look. It's smart to
Yep,
keep your options
exactly.
open. It's smart. A guy like Jalen Milroe, athletic guy. We're starting to see all of this shift towards the future of quarterbacks that can scramble to make moves with their legs. Jared Goff just isn't that guy, unfortunately. Great passer of the football, but just can't make a lot happen athletically. Jalen Milroe, much more talented. Hendon Hooker, it was always kind of an if with him. He came off such the big injury at the end of his college career. Was he going to be able to come into something? We heard the rumors, them trying to move him as well this offseason. We're going to see what happens with that once, free agency period opens up. But I think Jalen Milroe, he really brings something interesting to the table. I like him as a quarterback, like what he did at Alabama, like the adversity he battled through. And I think as a Detroit fan, you got to think, is Jared Goff the guy? And I think this year will be the big year for him. We're going to see what he does in this new offensive scheme. Was it Ben Johnson bringing out the best in Jared Goff, or is Jared Goff good enough to run a new offense as well?
Yeah, and I think it's important to understand that they're being very selective, right? They're not just interviewing every single quarterback or not talking to a bunch. They're talking to, I think they talked to two guys. One guy, I think from Central Michigan, I forget his name off the top of my head, Seth Hennigan. There we go. They talk with him too, but he's literally just a guy you bring in to be a backup. He's got no chance at all, at least the way it currently sits, to be a significant starter. Milroe is different, right? He's got all the physical tools. He was highly productive, battle tested in the SEC, went through two coaching staffs. We saw what Michael Penix Jr. did early with the Atlanta Falcons, working with that Kalen DeBoer staff that Milroe's coming out of now from the University of Alabama. So we know he's got the tools to live in an NFL quarterback in a modern offense. So it seems to be a solid target to go after. And again, it doesn't mean the Lions are going to draft him. It doesn't mean they're going to like move off of Jared Goff. But I love the way you put it. I think it's so really critical here. It's smart to look, right? It's what the good organizations do. The Chiefs and Alex Smith, they're going to the playoffs every single year, just about. They were looking for their guy. They got Mahomes. The rest is history. The Eagles had Carson Wentz, right? They traded up a lot to get him. Seemed like a franchise caliber quarterback, maybe not elite, but certainly very, very good. They were still looking. They got Jalen Hurts, two Super Bowl appearances and a championship later. The Baltimore Ravens won a Super Bowl with Joe Flacco, right? He had been the longtime quarterback there. still looking to get younger and better. They trade up to get Lamar Jackson, multiple MVPs. He's going to be a great quarterback for a very long time. The Ravens are going to be Super Bowl contender as long as Jackson is there, right? This is what teams do. They are constantly looking to try and get better at the quarterback position and cheaper and younger because that's the crux of winning in the NFL. You either have an all-time great, Mahomes, Brady, one of those guys, or you're young and cheap. That's the pattern. There are no other formulas that win. That's it, right? You cannot pay top dollar for the quarterback and have him be a BB plus guy and win titles. It just hasn't happened in the modern NFL. Maybe the Lions can break it. I hope they do. I really hope they do. But the reality is, like you said, and I think this is the whole point here, it is smart to look. It's the right strategy to take.